Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stage Debate with Cossack Isaac. Today's episode number 2 for the hospitality series. I couldn't be more excited. We have some fabulous guests on today. It was not easy to gather together. There's 3 amazing folks. These folks are busy and they gave us some of their precious time to share some of their advice and their journey, how to do it, how to really reach the top and climb that mountain. So Mitch Shah from Noble Investment Group is on today. We got Al Patel from Baywood and Dr. Ruby Dhalla from Dhalla Group of Companies. Congrats to Dr. Ruby for winning Women Hotelier of the Year by AHOA. Tremendous accomplishment. And obviously to the rest of the guests for their accomplishments as well. This all would not be possible without our sponsors. So really have no words to thank you guys. First and foremost to our corporate sponsor, Michael Stern of Line Star Tax and LSD Consultants, tax geniuses. They're not just going to file your taxes. They'll strategize with you about every in and out, how to save money, how to structure everything correctly. These are folks you definitely should reach out to. The people that I've sent their way have been super happy. Himesh Jaram, our series sponsor from Amritech Distribution, providing LG TVs to hotel owners for their hotels. He works with some of the biggest folks in the space. He's responsive, he's consistent, he's competitive with his pricing, but he's just such a nice guy. Definitely somebody to reach out to, definitely worth your while. And for our episode sponsor, I'm going to keep you a little suspended with this. Go on to the next slide and watch his video. These guys are awesome.
This episode is sponsored by Reconcile OTA, the solution to recovering millions in lost hotel revenue from online travel sites. Hotel owners and managers, listen up. Nearly 7% of your OTA bookings could be underpaid or completely missing. That is real money vanishing from your bottom line every single day. Reconcile OTA doesn't just find that missing money, they actually collect it for you. Their automated system audits Expedia, Booking.com, and Priceline transactions, processes those virtual credit cards, and deposits the funds directly into your bank account. Major brands like Choice Hotels and IHG trust Reconcile OTA as their preferred OTA recovery solution. With their pay-for-performance model, there is zero risk for you. Implementation takes minutes, whether you have 1 or 100 properties. So visit reconcileota.com today and mention this podcast for a free initial audit. Reconcile OTA, because in hospitality, every dollar matters.
I have no words to thank you guys, to the sponsors, to the guests. Dive in, tune in, leave your comments. I'm excited. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stage Debate with Cossack Isaac. We have some fabulous guests on today, and I appreciate each and every one of you for coming on. We have Mitch Shah from Noble, we have Al Patel from Baywood, we have Dr. Ruby Dhalla from Dhalla Group of Companies. You guys are big folks in the space, very respectable individuals and companies. Appreciate your time coming on. Obviously, there's always a next gen. There's folks that have been in the space for a while that could always use some advice, mentorship, and folks that really, really climb to the top. And like I always like to say, there's superstars out there in the world, and everybody wants to become that superstar, and everybody in their own way becomes that superstar. You don't have to make it to the top, but you got to give it your best. And you guys have done it for 30 years. You guys have really advocated on other hoteliers' behalfs, and we appreciate that. So with that, we'll all introduce ourselves. Mitt, give us a little bit of a background of who you are, how you started, and a little bit about Noble Investment Group.
Isaac, thank you for inviting me to join this podcast, and Ruby and Al, it's great to meet you. Ruby, we haven't spent much time together. Al, you and I think, been friends our entire careers and lives and like family. And I think that's kind of what's interesting about this business. You find your way into it through a number of different ways, and then you meet people that you go through life's journey with, both professionally and personally. And I always think about that from the standpoint is that, you never kind of walk a path alone, and who you get to do that with is becomes the most important decisions of your life. And so, having those people in my life in this industry and that I can rely on, count on, times of prosperity, times of great dynamics. We started our business 32 years ago when we opened our first Hampton Inn, and it seemed like a very, very different world than obviously ruble collapse of 98, dot-com bust of 2000, tragedy of 9/11, Zika, SARS, GFC, and COVID. So, all these times have shaped us and made us more resilient, but it's the people that, I think we've walked that journey to in our industry. I mean, Isaac, you mentioned this in your early comments, which we all stand on the shoulders of giants that came before us, but we also have those in the industry that have helped us think through things when times are good and how can we take advantage, and when times are more dynamic and how do we get through. So I think that journey has been, incredibly valuable for me, thinking about our business and how we have put our stake in the ground over 3 decades.
Beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Ruby Dhalla from Dhalla Group of Companies, you are a huge advocate in not just the hotel space, but in so many different areas. Obviously, we have politics in Canada and so much more. Give us a little bit of a background of you, your company, and how it's evolved.
Well, I've certainly had an interesting journey. As you shared, I've dedicated most of my life to public service prior to coming into the realm of hospitality and hotels. I had the honor of being elected as a member of Parliament in Canada and being one of the first women of Indian origin elected not only in Canada, but the entire Western world, and had the humble opportunity to be able to serve Canada and Canadians in my constituency for 3 terms. After serving in public office, I then went back into our family business, which has 3 verticals of healthcare, hospitality, and real estate. And I actually came into the world of hospitality due to a great tragedy in our family with the loss of my brother. He started off at the age of 15 as a bellboy at a hotel. Came home one day after being the bellboy and told my mom he was going to buy that hotel one day. And I think my mom, being a single mother, raising both my brother and I, kind of probably looked at him and said, okay. But he always believed in the book, The Secret, with the ethos of ask for it, believe it, receive it. And he went on to not only acquire that hotel that he was a bellboy in, but many other hotels along the way. So when he passed away, I came back to the office and had all of these files on my desk and didn't really know much about the hotel space other than how to book a hotel room on Expedia. And I quickly, had to learn to come up to speed to take on the family responsibility. And like Mitt said, it is such an incredible industry where there's so many people that you can rely on for support, for advice, to be able to gather their words of wisdom. And I remember going to my first conference and actually the excitement of hearing Mitt and about his story and his journey, and also his insight, of the hotel and hospitality space. And the hospitality space, I would say, is very unique from many of the other areas that I have worked in and been involved with, in that you have a great support system around you. And here we are. I delved into the world of hotels and hospitality and had the honor of being chosen by my peers as a Woman Hotelier of the Year. And it's been a really exciting journey. And like you said, Isaac, it's so important to also be able to mentor new people that want to come into the industry, and also for the ones that are already there to be able to work together in collaboration and cooperation, because there's enough space and enough room for everyone. And it's a pleasure to be on your show today with such distinguished personalities as Mitt and Al, and it's great to be here. And I hope that the podcast today is going to inspire a whole new generation of hoteliers and also reinvigorate passion for those that have been doing this for a long time.
I love that. I love that. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Ruby. Al Patel from Baywood. You guys have done so much in the space, and you're a true icon. Give us a little bit of a background of where you began, you yourself and Baywood as a company. Fill us in.
Thank you, Isaac. So this is our 50th year. My family's been in the business for 50 years this year. So it's been a long time. We started out in primarily the motel business and then evolved in the early 90s with the RTC crisis. My dad was able to buy some properties more in the economy hotel space. I joined in the kind of the early 90s when I was in college, helping more through responsibility, I think, than choice. My family, although they were good at buying hotels, they weren't really good at running them at the time. Language barriers, cultural barriers, things like that. And we never really hired people. We were running motels, right? So we were running them ourselves. The family was running it primarily ourselves with very little staff. So joined through responsibility, stayed through choice. Early on in my career, I ran economy hotels for my family as well. We started Baywood in early 2000s, 2001 to be exact, with our first Hampton Inn also. And people like Mitt were very influential in my life going on. He was about 7 years ahead of us, starting his kind of platform. And all of those examples were very influential in my life. So I appreciate like Mitt said, all the giants that I stand on the shoulders of. So I appreciate that. Today, we own around 130 hotels. Any given time, we have between 10 and 15 hotels under construction at any given time, primarily with the Hilton and Marriott family of brands.
Beautiful. And once we have you on, Al, let's dive a little deeper. So Mitch Patel from Vision was on the previous episode, and he mentioned something very, very funny, that obviously him growing up, he was working in a motel, and his parents, all they wanted was to create a better life for him, to become a professional, to go to school, become a doctor, become a lawyer. And eventually I think he majored in engineering, and he did it for a few years. And then he's like, this is not for me. He dove deep into the hotel space, and he is where he is right now. I'm a big believer that the immigrant mentality creates a fire in us that there's no way of stopping. That doesn't put down anybody else that doesn't have that in their life, but I just think it's a little harder. I think especially, and yes, I will focus in on the Indian community as a whole, there's a certain immigrant mentality that's somewhat unstoppable. And my question to you is, and I'll just add that the only way to go through a struggle is not to circumvent it, is really go straight through it. You got to go straight through. That's the only way you're going to learn. You will not be able to bench press 320 pounds if you don't start with 5, 10, 15, 20 and do the hard work. I always talk about, I'm a huge basketball guy. I think Mitt is as well. I've done a little research on him. I do want to throw out a blessing for Mitt and his special Atlanta Hawks. Maybe we'll get there one day. One day we'll add some piece to the puzzle. Mitt, we have some hope. Trey is good. I will say that LeBron James, I grew up in Cleveland. He talks a lot about his championship against the Golden State Warriors in 2016. So while he got rings prior to then, that was the hardest feat he ever accomplished. And I look back at times in my life that things could have been challenging, and I went straight through it instead of around it. And that's really what built me into what I am today. Can you elaborate on that and humble beginnings of how you began? I know you gave us a little bit of a background, but obviously there's probably been many times that you did not have 10 to 15 hotels under construction at any given time. So my question is, were there any points that you were ready to throw in the towel? Obviously, you're a prodigy, but there's so many folks out there that haven't made it to the top. What taught you, what gave you that grit? What started you off and really made you who you are today?
I don't really believe anybody in our community really has ever thrown in the towel. And so those were the people that you saw in the business, and nobody threw in the towel. So it's like, almost like that was never an option. So it's like you just work day to day to day, and you just look at what's in front of you today, get that done today. I rarely look too far into the future. It was like, what do I need to get done today? What do I need to get done this week? And that's always been my mentality about getting things done. The longer you look, the more afraid you become, the more daunting the task becomes if we just focus on the task ahead of you. And that's how it's always done in myself.
Got it. And when COVID hit, you didn't obviously you were going to throw in the towel. I'm assuming there was a lot of good stuff going on, but nobody knew if that was going to last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and everything was going to go bonkers, right? What happened for you then?
Yeah, I mean, we'd always have advice from elders like don't take too much debt on, too much this, too much that. And you're always mindful of those things. And then when COVID hit and, we let go of 2,500 people in a day, and that was probably the darkest day of my career, I'd say, thus far. And, of course, at that time, you have thoughts of maybe this is the end. This is the beginning of the end for us and for our journey in the business. But, again, even in those darkest days, we focused on the task at hand that day. We worked on group reservations, things like that. We were working with revenue management that we're still working remotely to see, we were working with different universities, different government agencies. And, we were always just working, the task of the day, let's fill this hotel up today, or let's get a couple of rooms in-house today to at least pay for the few staff members that we had. So it was very much, there were dark days for sure, but it was just a question of working.
Got it. So you never really gave up, or that thought.
Not at all.
I love that.
Not
I love
even
that.
for a second. Yeah.
Wow. Mick, can we talk a little bit about humble beginnings, and also are any silver linings for you and Noble through COVID? Anything that came out afterwards that you look back in hindsight, you're like, wow, this was actually not a good thing. Of course not, but something special that came out of it.
Isaac, I want to actually go back to this comment and this question that you posed around the immigrant's journey, because I think in many ways what Al described, and Ruby, while we haven't spent time together, I know you by reputation, and you have broken glass ceilings in kind of every step of the way here. And you think about these stories, and then you think about the immigrant journey. Like, the most risk that was taken was by those that left wherever home was, and they came to a new place for this better life. So, like, whatever takes place here, right? And I go back to this whole concept, and Al and I were together a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about, like, just standing on the shoulders of giants, and I think that's really where, when things get dark, you kind of go back to, like, whoever in our families, for me, it was my parents and sometimes his grandparents, et cetera, that actually took the greatest risk. What could have been like for them? Because they came here by themselves. They came here with no money. They came here, like, having to build everything, like, from scratch. And, Mitch's comments, is again, dear friend of all of ours as well. It's like, it's right. Like, we were all taught, like, I started, like, college as I was supposed to go to medical school, right? I took biochem physics my freshman year, and my head exploded. I was like, this is terrible. No offense, all the time. My wife's a family practitioner, but I was like, I'm clearly not smart enough to do this. And having the ability to lean on others and to understand that this is the sacrifices that were made. I call it the greatest blessing, being 10 years old and working at the Winkler Motor Inn, which is my parents' first property, to be one of my greatest blessings. Now, it didn't feel like that when I was missing a basketball game or not able to go to a Boy Scout jamboree, et cetera. But what it taught me was just the inordinate love of family and how that matters more than anything. And that sacrifice was made. Ruby, you talked about the sacrifice coming back to the business that your brother created. I just think those are things that last generations, right? Like, an understanding of those stories that come through. So let me pivot to the question you just asked, Isaac, about silver linings during COVID. And I've thought about this through every downturn. Out of tragedy and crisis comes opportunity for people to do things that they may not know that it was inside of them. And I've had this throughout my career, that those heroes that are born out of great tragedy, out of crisis, that do things for others and their communities, and then also their families and their organizations. To me, that's what I take out of these crises. Several years ago, the tragedy of 9/11, our company was 7 years old, and we had significant growth that we had just started. We had 5 hotels under construction. We had just bought 2 first full-service hotels, and I woke up the morning after we had a strategic planning meeting, and we had taken everybody out to dinner, and I've got this receipt that's actually here sitting next to me in my office that is at Morton Steakhouse with 14 people and all this great food, and et cetera, and it reads 11:07 p.m., September 10th, 2001. And so the next morning at 7:30, we were all meeting for breakfast, and then we're going to start our meetings at 8. And then we all obviously watched the tragedy unfold as it did, and we sent people home. And I remember not sleeping that night and coming in. It was 6:30 in the morning, and all the lights were on office by office, and I just thought that we just left in a hurry. But one after another, members of my team were in the office, and they all kind of followed me back to my office. And I knew at that point in time that we had something. I didn't know if we were going to make it, to be clear, right? But I knew we had something, and there was a team of people that cared about each other and cared about what we wanted to accomplish. And that was invigorating and emboldening at a time that I was probably feeling like everything that I was about to risk, and family members' investments that they had trusted me with, et cetera. Like, I'll move into an apartment, but, like, I can't lose their money. Like, this is not possible. And so I give you that because that's obviously 25, 24 years ago. But I feel the power of that every day. And so when COVID happened, what's the silver lining? Silver lining is that many of those same people and others that had joined them and us felt very much the exact same way. When you're kind of in a position where you have the honor of leading an organization and you have people that are willing to go through a wall for each other, like, it's powerful, right? You use every sports analogy that you want to. Like, I've always wanted to have an organization that was built like a high performance sports organization, but had the love of family benching a family member is really hard. It's not really hard in a high performance sports organization, right? You still love each other. And I feel like those are the things that come out of these times that just make us stronger.
Wow. A lot there. Wow. It talks to me a lot. Obviously, it reminds us the importance of family and togetherness and what's really important in life, what our why is. Dr. Ruby, we're going to get to you right now. I want to share something with you guys that I heard. I don't know if it's true, but the message is still clear. And this is something, Ruby, I'd love you to elaborate on. So I think somebody one time asked one of the princes of Dubai, what do you drive? And he said, hey, I drive a Mercedes decked out in diamonds. He's like, what did your father drive? My father drove a Range Rover. My grandfather rode a Camel. My great-grandfather rode a Camel. My kids drive Range Rovers. My grandchildren are going to ride camels. So they asked him what he meant. And he said, from weak makes strong, and from strong makes weak. And the message for me, I think, is very clear. Growing up, any rich kid that I was friends with, they didn't know how to pick up a broom. They didn't know how to turn on a computer. Right. I didn't grow up rich. I taught myself how to mow lawns, and I knocked on every single door in the community, and I made more money in 8th grade than anybody else in my class. And that's what taught me the hustle. That doesn't mean we have to count out anybody that grew up rich. But the question is that so many of us work so hard to make a better life for our families. Our parents did that. You're doing that. So Ruby, I'd love for you to elaborate also on your journey, how you began, humble beginnings, culture, company culture, but also on this point as well, creating this, let's call this rich environment of success. What happens for your kids? Why are they not going to go ahead and be the person who doesn't know how to do the dirty work?
I think, first of all, to build upon what Al and Mitt said, I think within not only our South Asian community, but immigrant communities in general that have left behind so much to come to our, countries, whether it's Canada or the United States, for the betterment of not only their own life, but I think most importantly for the future, for their children. They have made so many sacrifices, and there's been so much struggle. My mom immigrated to Canada in 1972 and left behind a very great life in India. And she always says she stayed in Canada and came to Canada for the future of my brother and I, so that when she would have her kids in Canada, that we would have the opportunities for the life that she always dreamed of us, to be able to have. And growing up, there were really only three options. You either became a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. And there wasn't a lot of other options that we were given growing up. And when we saw the struggle that our parents went through, you just wanted to make sure that you fulfilled their dreams. And, so both my brother and I actually ended up becoming doctors, and my brother was more of an entrepreneur and I was in public service. But I think ultimately you have to follow what your passion is. But getting back, I think, to seeing the struggle that our parents go through, I think Al perhaps said it best, that quitting is never, ever an option. And you're always faced with so many challenges. I mean, my brother and I were children of my mother, who was a single mother growing up, and she raised us, and we saw a lot of hardship and a lot of hard times, but we just never, ever gave up. And I think that's for anything in life, even as you go forward and you face challenges, that Mitt talked about, whether it was 9/11 or during, the pandemic, you have to just literally keep on coming up with solutions, not talking about the problem, and just keep moving forward. And another, valuable point that I think Mitt spoke about was the importance of really surrounding yourself with a team, a team that really believes in your vision, a team that believes in your mission, in your passion, in your purpose, and a team that is really going to ensure that it takes you to the next level. It's really important, I think, to not be surrounded by yes people that are always saying yes, yes, yes to everything and every idea and every opportunity, but people who are really going to challenge you as a leader that is heading up the organization, who are going to have a debate with you, are going to be able to have a discussion with you to ensure that, your company actually achieves the best. But I think that, touching upon your question, Isaac, I think the whole journey has really been defined by never ever giving up, and also never ever thinking that there is no mountain peak too great and no ceiling too high. And, Mitt was talking about me shattering glass ceilings. When I first ran for public office, there was literally no woman of color that had ever run run for public office at that point, and there was no one at such a young age that had run for political office. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And you just, I think when you have that passion inside of you, you just attract the right team, and the right energy and the right momentum just sort of builds. And the same thing in the hotel space. I was talking about having, 130 hotels, and which is such an incredible achievement. And they started off from hotels, and it's people along the way that had that journey and that had that vision and that passion. And I think when you have it, everything else around that, whether it's building your team and the financial part of it, everything else just follows. But life is really about ensuring that you actually take that risk. And that's what our parents' generations did when they immigrated. Many of them didn't even speak English. They had very limited resources. I mean, my mom, she used to take the bus, and I always loved debating, and she would take me to my debating, championships, and take two buses for me to be able to get there. And we saw her growing up with all of that. But I think is the fact that we just never ever gave up. We always had this vision and this dream to want to make it. And I think that when you're surrounded by a great team and you're surrounded with this positive attitude and a positive mindset, anything in life literally becomes possible.
I love it. I love it. And great points. And like you said, the importance of having a team and togetherness and people that believe in your vision and will support you, not just trying to steal your secrets and run for the hills, is
You
so,
meet a
so
lot of those
important.
too, though.
You do have those. But I think that there's something special in the Indian community. I think there's a big togetherness that it's unmatched. It's truly unmatched. And obviously talking about, we didn't approach this so much, but this ego idea that you guys talk about a lot, especially the Dhalla guys talk about a lot, is and something I've seen, and this is not to put down multifamily people at all, but I think there's something special in the hotel world that even big folks, they don't come across as like, I've got it all. That's just my experience knocking on doors with people. There's just the receptiveness, the niceness. It's just different. So Al, take the floor for a second. What do you say? I know could be a touchy topic, but I'm actually very, very curious. This idea that I brought up about this Prince of Dubai, regardless if it's true or not, but this idea from Weak Makes Strong and we creating a rich environment for our children, how are we going to keep them as folks that could still come in and clean the floor when it's needed?
Mitt and I talked about this very subject just a few weeks ago. It's something that worries us, right? Because you've seen this over and over and over again. They say the first generation starts a business, the second generation grows it, and the old adage is the third generation kind of does what they do with it. So those are some things that concern me very much. But, I hope that my children have seen my work ethic, and I believe they have, because I see that in how they approach their studies, is that I hope they've seen their grandfather, me, my contemporaries and my business work so hard to create a better life for their kids. And I hope that they've seen this and learned by example. And really, that's what I'm betting on, Isaac. My kids will be educated way better than I was. So I'm hoping that they'll take this education, roll it around with this example of hard work that the previous generations have set, and they'll take that baton and run with it. Do I expect them to run as hard, as fast in the heat like we did? No. But I do expect them to run with it.
I've heard on two separate occasions Kevin O'Leary talk about. First, I'll actually start with Shaq. There's a famous clip of Shaq. He told this kid he could go buy a car, and his kid's like, "Okay, Dad, I have this BMW over here. Could you come pick me up?" He's like, "Dude, you're not getting a BMW." He's like, "What do you mean, Dad? We're rich." He's like, "No, no, no. I'm rich. You're not rich." And I've actually heard Kevin O'Leary say on two different occasions in person this idea that he took a flight to some location in Europe, and he gets on the plane and he makes a left towards first class, and his kid looks at his ticket. He's like, "Dad, like, why am I in 36C? Why am I not coming?" He's like, "Dude, I made money. I worked for it. I'm sitting here. When you make money, you can come back." And it actually taught him, and he became like some like top guy at Tesla. But again, yeah, the fear is real, but we give over that mentality of that hard work ethic. It does, I guess, seep down. Mitt, I would love to hear your take on that.
I don't think that anyone kind of thinks that they're a perfect parent or they raise the kids perfectly and the like. I think you do the best that you can. I'll go back to an earlier comment that I made. I think one of the greatest gifts that I had was understanding how much my parents loved my brother and I, and the sacrifices they made for us, and ultimately, what that meant to our family unit. I feel incredibly fortunate that our kids, who are now 27 and 23, had the benefit of growing up close to both sets of grandparents. And also, my brother doesn't have any kids, but my wife's two younger sisters, their five kids, along with our two, they've grown up within a couple miles of each other. And, if you ask them, like, who would you like to spend time with, they'd all say each other. And so they've had this as their upbringing because, quite honestly, my two brother-in-laws made sacrifices to be in Atlanta, and, all these kids grew up together. And my kids are the two eldest. And so they've had the benefit of not just us raising them, but like community and friends and their kids and the like. So I think we started with an advantage so that it wasn't just my wife and I, but this collective. So as I think about them and their own journey, a couple of things stand out, which is when they both graduated from college, they both went off the payroll, if you will. Never asked us for another nickel. I thought that was telling because our son graduated in 2020 and moved to New York and started working at a very dynamic time in the world, but most specifically in New York, and did it all himself. And so he spent the last 5.5 years at Blackstone. Serendipitously today, he is moving from New York back to Atlanta, where, unbeknownst to 100 people, including Al and I having this conversation, the goal was him never to come back to Noble. And our daughter, who's 23, she's in investment banking up there, so she's still going to be up there. But here's what happened. Much like Al discussing his journey with parents in motels, that's all that was. But go back to the early 90s. Hampton Inns were really only created in 1984, Marriott Courtyard around the same, et cetera. So if you think about that journey, there were really only motels up until that time period that were there. And so this new evolution of select service and stay was just then taking place. And so today, Urgent's not coming back to Noble to go do what we've been doing. He's coming back for the next evolution of what this industry is going to be. So what is that? Right now, we've got a big platform that we call flexible accommodations. What is that? Well, it's taking our old first generation extended stay hotels and really running them like short-term apartments, right? Taking an operating model that's probably 18 people and then it's 6. And so at the same revenue stream, you can generate 50 to 60% profit margins in that business, right? That's totally different. And then taking what we helped create with Marriott and Hilton and Hyatt in terms of the next generation, Marriott Studio Res, Hilton Live Smart, Hyatt Studios, and doing the exact same thing and building a platform that way. And I said this, Al and I, we had this conversation. Marriott's in the service department business. Hilton is going to be in the student housing business. Marriott's in the homes and villas business. Like the hotel business as we know it today is not going to be that business as we think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so this next generation, they're not going to do what we do. Like if they find their way back, and by the way, I would argue that, again, I've told 100 people that Urgent was in industrial and logistics at Blackstone and multi and other asset classes as well, that hospitality, just like, why would he want to come to do that? Except for the fact that we are now in a part of real estate whereby financial leverage is not going to be available anymore to all asset classes. The only thing that's going to matter is operating leverage, right? And so what we happen to have, Ruby and Al and I, is a platform that has lived by operating leverage, not financial leverage. So now if you can take this operating leverage and you can apply it to other traditional asset classes at a time where you're not going to have cap rate compression, financing costs will end up being around what they are. Look at the forward SOFR curve. And the reality is that we'll probably have 3 rate cuts or whatever, but the all-in cost of borrowing is still going to be in the 6s, right? And so the only real way in which to create alpha is going to be able to turn the dials in these businesses. And it just so happens these major brands, they're not going to have Al going out and building 20 hotels a year, right? It's impossible. The numbers just don't work. And so they have to figure out other ways in which to grow their platform because they're C Corps, right? That's all they're valued at. So today Marriott buys Citizen M. Okay, well, that's kind of a traditional hotel brand. We'll wake up tomorrow and they're going to buy some multifamily business and they're going to bolt it on to apartments by Bonvoy, right? And then they're going to buy some other component. So this is kind of a circuitous route of going back to our kids. If our kids have been in the room and in the family to see a series of entrepreneurial activities change the outcomes of our lives, and they know what hard work looks like because they've been a part of these family units, the opportunity in which to go take these platforms and these businesses, whether they do it on their own, they're part of our shop, becomes very natural and normal, much like Al's conversation of like stepping into a motel business, taking advantage of the RTC and saying, okay, I'm going to go transform this into something that has never really existed for our family. And oh, by the way, never really existed for the industry. So both of these things are going to happen at the same time. Fast forward 30 years, and that's where we're at for this next generation. And I actually believe that this next generation is far more capable. Yes, Al and I kind of joke. The whole concept of like having a prenup when we got married, like, okay, well, what's 50% of zero? You know, like, so it's just like on either side, it's like, well, okay, so there's this whole generation of kids that'll go up where now the parents are actually thinking about this. But I actually think they're more prepared. They're smarter. They're more educated. You know, technology. Every single conversation, people want to talk about, like, what do you think AI in our industry is going to be at? I'm like, dude, I just figured out how to work the remote in my house. And I know, like, I'm one of those people that, like, basically I use ChatGPT for its very basic premise. But I also understand that this is an evolutionary process, and we're in a business that you cannot disrupt through AI because people need human experiences, right? Like, they're not going to just wear goggles all day and have this virtual reality vacation, right? They need to go see people and be around each other. But where does this go? I think that we've got a generation that is very excited about taking us there. And I believe that work ethic that they'll have in order to get there, I'm actually really excited about it. I've actually made a commitment internally here, like to get younger, because I've had a lot of people be here for a long period of time, which I'm very grateful for. And balancing that with this next generation of thought leaders and helping take us there has been a high priority.
Wow. Wow. That was fascinating, Mitt. I believe it that it's true. I believe it to be true. I've dealt with a lot of second gen guys, and there's a lot of sophistication there. And I agree with you. I think that there's nothing that can match a certain, like, actual coming over 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever it may be. But there is a lot to deal with. We have a lot to deal with. So obviously people like you guys created the path for many folks and people before you. But the second gen guys, the younger guys, let's call it, are really being handed a lot what to work with. That was truly fascinating. Dr. Ruby Dhalla, if I would leave you with a minute or two to give a pep talk to a new guy, what does it boil down to? I know that you're very into no ego, which I love. The 1 to 2 minute pep talk to a new guy starting out today.
I think just to really read about my journey, because I've been through, so many different challenges and have been through tragedy, have been through grief, have been through a lot of obstacles, a lot of sacrifices along the way. And when it comes down to it, I think ultimately when you have faith in the Almighty and you have faith in whoever your God may be, and you surround yourself with a solid foundation of family and close friends, that anything in life is literally possible. And I think it really stems from the book, The Secret of Ask for It, Believe It, Receive It. And I think, like both Mitt and Al said in their earlier remarks, that there are going to be challenges along the way. And it's not talking about the problems, it's actually looking for what are the solutions and trying to come up with creative ways. We're talking about the young generation. There's so much opportunity out there that didn't exist before. When our parents immigrated to the country, they, as an example, I was saying, bought motels and they started off, their respective businesses. Our generation sort of saw a lot of those sacrifices, those struggles, and took it to the next level. But I think the next generation is really going to be able to combine so much of what they have learned and the evolution of technology, the evolution of AI, into making what we have so much better and taking it to much greater heights. To all of the people that are listening to this, in terms of advice, especially for women as well, I know that women face their own set of challenges, whether it's accessing capital, whether it's getting introductions, to the right people, into the right environments, to ensure that your particular project actually comes into fruition. Knock on as many doors as you need to. And if anyone says no to you, just go to the next person. I think it's really important to always remember to ignore the noise. And sometimes what happens is that when we're in a situation or we have an idea, we get so caught up in what he said and she said, or some of the negativity that surrounds it, or people telling you that it can't be done. Follow your heart and follow your intuition. If you believe that this is something that you want to see a success, just go out there and talk to as many people, and never be hesitant to pick up the phone or to go to a conference and talk to one of the speakers or reach out by email. What's the worst thing that can happen? Someone's just going to say no to you, but there is going to be that one person that will give you that opportunity, that will open that door, that will take that phone call.
Al, a minute or two to a brand new guy starting in the industry, what it really boils down to.
I see a lot of newcomers come to me for advice, and they all want to be just deal guys. And my advice to them always is, and they don't like my advice most of the time, is get to know the business, get to know the ins and outs, the every single detail of this business. Of course, you can be a deal guy later on, but until you understand, hotels are an operating business. It's not like multifamily or something where you just kind of hand off the keys, or a self storage where once you're kind of booked, you're good. There's so many details of the hotel industry, and I always encourage them to learn every detail of it and be an expert at every single detail of our business. That would be my advice to them.
No, I love that. I love that. And just for a second, I've seen so many guys out there transact just to transact. There's act fees, right? And there's so many reasons just to try to become big. And especially in the hotel space, there's a huge management component to it, right? Like you said, it's a business, it's operations, and you could have 10 that are doing horribly, or you could have 3 that are doing exceptionally well. I just was on a call with a guy, I'm not going to mention him by name, but a big hotel owner from Texas on Friday. And he was talking about, I don't know what he has, 30 hotels, something solid. And he's like, we have to refuse capital at times. And I was like, I respect that. If you have to refuse capital and you're not going to do a deal just to do a deal, but you're going to do the right deal, that's something that I truly respect. So I appreciate that. A minute or two advice to a new guy, what it really boils down to.
Al's comment, and Ruby made a comment as well. If you kind of combine those, which is really understanding our business, all components of it, it is an operating business. And so this is not a passive allocator business. And the reason why I think those that are specialists in this space have had the ability to get through dynamic times is because they can operate their way out of these challenges, right? It's hard, but where you've seen some real gaps in performance are from allocators that rely on others in which to kind of execute. You get sucked in a little bit by 7 and 8 caps compared to multi and industrial, et cetera. But when things get really challenged, you've got to be able to understand and to operate through that. So I think that's right. Second part is what Ruby said in terms of, seeking out others. This is a different business in that people do feel very collegial. There's a real togetherness about this industry. I've felt very fortunate that at every step of my career, I've had people that were 5, 10 years ahead of me as a leader, as a professional, as a parent, give me guidance on the things that they learned along the way, that I could take portions of all that and kind of bring to myself in how I thought about my own journey, right? And as I mentioned, nobody ever walks through success on their own. And I feel like having the benefit of all of that, and still today, has made me a better leader. And so to me, it's putting in the work. I don't know if success would have come if not having gone through the journey. Isaac, you made a comment, which is people want to get from 0 to 60 to 100 in record speed. And maybe that's possible. I don't know it to be true on my standpoint, because I think it goes back to Jim Collins's 10,000 hours, right? Like to really have expertise in something. And so to go back to the analogy, it's like, how do you become a better shooter? Get in the gym and put up shots, right? And be prepared for the moment. And the only way to do that is to be prepared for the moment is putting in the work.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. What an episode. What conversations. Unbelievable. Definitely exceeded my expectations. Hope it did for you as well. Thank you again to our guest. I know you took time out of your day today. This was unbelievable. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Definitely folks you guys should reach out to, each and every one of them. Have a great day.